At the beginning of October 2020, the elections to the regional councils were held in the Czech Republic. Elections were held in 13 regions, except of the capital city of Prague, because Prague is technically not considered to be a region and the elections there are held separately. These are elections which are considered to be the second order elections, so they are not as popular among the citizens as parliamentary or presidential elections. This year's turnout was almost 38%, which is actually quite high. And in fact, it's the second highest turnout in these regional elections since the year of 2000, when these elections were held in the Czech Republic for the first time. This shows us some kind of interest of the citizens and the fact that the citizens were actually considering these regional elections to be a little bit more important than the ones before. Initially, regional elections were functioning as a kind of an evaluation of the government, of the governing parties, because since 2000 to 2012, elections to the regional councils were always held exactly 2 years after the parliamentary elections. So it was exactly in the middle of the parliamentary term. And usually, if in these regional elections the opposition strengthened and the governing parties weakened, it was because the citizens and the voters were not satisfied with the government and how they governed. But due to the premature falls of governments and then subsequent early parliamentary elections, this periodicity does not work anymore. And this year's regional elections were held 3 years after last parliamentary elections, which were held in 2017. But it seems that the regional elections still function as some sort of an evaluation of the government, because even in these last regional elections, the opposition strengthened and the governing parties weakened, which seems that the citizens and particularly the voters are not very much satisfied with the government. The elections were mainly affected by the pandemic from the technical point of view. The government has issued some specific rules for both the commissioners and the voters themselves. So all of them had to observe strict hygienic measures. All of them had to observe spacing, and all of them had to wear masks all the time. And the polling stations were disinfected quite often. The commissioners had to wear gloves, and it was all of these hygienic measures were something new, something what is not usual under the normal circumstances. But a complete novelty, which was introduced by the government, was an institution of so-called drive-through polling stations, because there was actually a quite lively debate whether and how to ensure a possibility to vote for people who were infected and for voters who were in preventive quarantine. Some government officials were actually suggesting to deny an option to vote for these voters, but this didn't meet with a positive response among the public, and under pressure from the opposition and the public, the government had to come up with an idea. And so they introduced this institution of drive-through polling stations, where registered votes who were infected or who were in preventive quarantine could vote right from the car to the hand of a man in a complete medical suit. It was again under very strict hygienic measures, and it was organized partly by the army, because it was quite complicated to organize it and it needed to be organized quickly. So the army took part in the organization. Yes, we do have some interesting stories. Some of the government steps are particularly interesting because both of the governing parties, which are in the coalition, their typical voter is a senior in a retirement age. And it's a very large group of voters, but it's also one of the most vulnerable groups of voters during the pandemic. And it was quite obvious that the government was trying to do what they could to ensure that the elderly people were not afraid to go to the polls. So they made a decision to they decided that masks and respirators will be sent to every senior over the age of 65 in the Czech Republic by the Czech Post, which is a state company. Specifically, they allocated 5 masks and 1 respirator to each of the senior. This is not particularly bad idea. It's connected with the fact that even some 3 months after the pandemic outbreak in the Czech Republic, masks and respirators were not available, not even for employees of the hospitals and nurses and doctors, and the citizens couldn't buy it anywhere. Couldn't buy it anywhere. Actually, Czechs sewed the masks from cotton fabrics themselves. So the government was afraid that, or these 2 governing political parties were afraid that seniors are going to be too scared and too afraid of COVID-19 to go to the polling stations. So they wanted to provide them with this protection, masks and respirator. As I said, it's not a bad idea at all, but it would need it to be earlier with a sort of a pure background. But it was an idea, and it was an idea that they came up with immediately before the elections. And also it was done very unprofessionally, under from the order of the government. The employees of the Czech Post were opening the original packaging of the masks. They were putting these masks to the envelopes without any other packaging, which obviously devaluated them. And after that, the internet was then flooded with photos from these people of damaged masks, with comments from these people that they are not going to wear these masks because they are afraid, or that the usage is not even possible due to the damage. So this was one interesting story. And also it was very clear that the government was procrastinating with an overall lockdown. They didn't want to do it, and it did not really came until after the elections, because the government parties did not want to do such an unpopular decision before the elections. It was quite obvious that they didn't want to do this. I would not say that the disinformation scene in the Czech Republic has changed due to the pandemic, but I would say that the disinformation scene became much more active. Strategies and propaganda techniques remain the same, but the disinformators are using them much more and much more intensively. So, in general, disinformation websites publish more articles, and they focus heavily on the pandemic issues. They make more usage of foreign sources, and they take time to, for example, translate foreign videos, conspiracy and propaganda videos to the Czech language. This is a technique they used even before, but nowadays they use it to much greater extent. And really, any video from a famous conspiracy theorist, any video regarding the pandemic, the vaccination, anything, they take it over, then translate it into Czech language, they add the subtitles, and then they publish it on the disinformation websites, and then on specific Facebook pages, so they could spread it. Also, more conspiracy theories are also spreading. We do have some disinformation websites which are purely oriented to the conspiracy theories, but we do have a lot of disinformation websites which under normal circumstances are trying to avoid these pure conspiracies, and they just share half-truths and manipulated information, and they are being much more careful with the usage of information and disinformation, and they're trying to make it harder for the people to debunk disinformation, and they're being quite careful. But nowadays, even these disinformation websites publish articles about pure conspiracies without any hesitation. There have been also several disinformation websites which are devoted solely to the pandemic issues, and also there is a number of Facebook groups where people are very active in spreading disinformation and conspiracies. Due to the fact that it was elections to the regional councils, disinformation about coronavirus or anything else did not play a big role, because these issues are being addressed on the national level, and the regional councils have little to do with the decision-making process on the national level. So disinformation about coronavirus and disinformation in general are not actively used during the campaigns before regional elections. But disinformation do play a role in other elections in the Czech Republic, and they can influence the outcomes. The last time that we can observe such an example was the elections to the European Parliament in 2019. One of the most frequently read disinformation website in the Czech Republic called on its readers to vote for a specific person from a far-right party. And this really worked. And this person then got into the European Parliament and is the MP right now. and he got into the European Parliament even though he was candidating from the 8th place on the candidating list. And thanks to the preferential votes, he even jumped over the leader of the candidate list. So this is clearly linked to this particular disinformation website, which was supporting this politician and really called on its readers to vote for this specific person. And then he got enough preferential votes to jump over to the first place from the 8th place. So it had to be really a lot of the preferential votes. So yes, disinformation campaigns and disinformation narratives, they do influence voters' behavior in the Czech Republic, but not particularly before the regional elections. We did not observe any case of this. There are two relevant political parties in the Czech party system that can be considered anti-systemic. The first political party is the Communist Party. It's a far-left party which calls on the legacy of the original Communist Party of Czechoslovakia from the time when Czechoslovakia was a part of the Soviet bloc. And the members of this political party, they share a lot of disinformation about vaccines, for example, and a lot of pro-Kremlin narratives because they are quite obviously very much pro-Russian. And then the second party, it's a far-right party, nationalistic party, which is called Party of Direct Democracy. Both of these parties, they spread disinformation on daily basis. Members of these parties, they write articles on the disinformation websites. They are being active. You can find a lot of conspiracies and hoaxes and disinformation on their Facebook profiles, and they quite typically disseminate disinformation. And it's no difference with the pandemic. They also share a lot of disinformation about the pandemic. You can find all of the conspiracies about vaccination or questioning the origin of the virus or questioning the existence of the virus itself on their Facebook profiles. But I don't think that they are using this disinformation to gain more supporters. Definitely not before these regional elections. Actually, it was a big lose for both of the parties. A bigger lose it was for the Communist Party. The Communist Party won only 13 seats out of a total of 675 available seats. So that's almost nothing. And the Party of Direct Democracy, although they won about half as many seats as they did in the last regional elections, the total number of their seats is still only 35, again out of a total number of 675 available seats. So it's a marginal number. So yes, both of the parties, they use this information actively and on daily basis, but they didn't use COVID-19 related disinformation before the regional elections to gain more supporters there. In essence, the politicians repeat the common hoaxes and conspiracies in general. So as for the coronavirus, they're just really repeating the most common, most successful disinformation narratives, really questioning the origin of the virus and questioning the existence of the virus itself, saying that this was an artificial biological weapon created by the Americans to win the economic war with China, or that really any other option of how to deny or how to question the origin of the virus and deny the natural origin of the virus, and then questioning the existence of the virus itself, questioning the pandemic as a whole, saying that it was some sort of a big plan of the global elites to depopulate the planet and reset the world. The Party of Direct Democracy is a very typical disseminator of disinformation narratives, and they're also very anti-European. So they spread a lot of disinformation and hoaxes which are related to COVID-19 and at the same time to the European Union. So as an example, we can use a hoax which says that the European Union purposefully created and spread the virus among the European countries in order to exterminate the elderly population, and this was supposed to be a plan how to save the rich social systems which are typical for the Western countries. So we have some politicians which are members of the parliament or members of the Senate who are spreading disinformation and who are sharing these common disinformation narratives related to pandemic. But again, I repeat, they has not used it as a part of their electoral campaign yet. But we are going to have parliamentary elections next year in the Czech Republic, so we are expecting that this whole pandemic situation and the way how the government dealt with it is going to be a big issue, a big question, which is going to be discussed as a part of the political campaign. Well, probably the only unexpected result was the result of the Czech Social Democratic Party. The Czech Social Democratic Party is a governing party. It's one of the two which is in the governing coalition, but this party is not doing very well. It became very unpopular, and in the pre-election polls, it even looks like that in the next parliamentary elections, which are going to be held in the Czech Republic next year, this party probably won't get it into the parliament. Yet, this is one of the most traditional and one of the oldest political parties in the Czech Republic. So these numbers are actually, in general, quite surprising. A bad result in the regional elections was expected, but the surprise was how bad a result it was. The Czech Social Democratic Party was defending 125 seats in the regional councils, and eventually they were able to defend only 28 of them. So in the last regional elections 4 years ago, they gained 128 seats and 25 seats. And this fall, they only gained 28 seats, which is a huge drop-off. But as I said at the beginning, the opposition strengthened and the governing parties weakened. And it's quite usual for the regional elections. And in general, this result is not surprising at all. But how badly this turned out to be for the Czech Social Democratic Party, that was really surprising. I think that technology was a little bit more important than it was in the previous elections. It was mainly because of the drive-through polling stations that I mentioned before. It was quite complicated to organize it, and it needed to be organized quickly. So technology was helpful there, and it was one of the reasons why the army took part in the organization. But also, I think that in these regional elections, the voters were sort of making the decision more based on themselves and on their own thoughts, and also on what they saw in the TV or read on the internet. Because due to a partial lockdown, the opportunity to discuss it in person was limited. So the people were not able to discuss it with their friends or their co-workers, and it's a common topic before the elections that you discuss with your colleagues and with your friends, and they couldn't do it as easily. So I think that in this terms, technology played a bit more important role in the last regional elections than in the previous ones.